All right, let's get into week two, or not week two, but response two of our back and forth series. As you can tell by the title, we're going over animes versus endings. Why do they suck? This is in no small part motivated by the endings of Jujutsu Kaisen and My Hero Academia being not great, to say the least. So we're going to be breaking down why this problem of animes having bad endings exists. So, just to get the obvious out of the way, bad endings are not exclusive to anime. Obviously, we got Game of Thrones infamously bad for how terrible its ending was, left pretty much everyone disappointed. And over here on the right, we've got a list of good shows that have bad endings found from the greatest source of all time, Reddit. Just comparing the IMDb scores for the averages for the entire show's runtime versus the ending. You can see you got stuff like House of Cards, Game of Thrones again, Pretty Little Liars. So obviously, bad endings have not been monopolized by anime. But there is, at the very least, a perception online that animes generally have bad endings. So let's go into some examples of why that is. Here we see we got four examples of notoriously bad endings. Starting off with the most recent one, Jujutsu Kaisen. Obviously just ended this past weekend. Uh, Biggest disappointment is that it felt like a lot was left on the table. There was a lot of characters didn't even get a chance to interact. But most notably for me is probably Gojo and Yuji post Gojo's unsealing. We got no Sukuna backstory. We got the random plot lines with the simple domain thrown at the end on the third to last chapter, as opposed to something like a Gojo funeral or a Yuji mourning Choso or Todo mourning Yuki or stuff like that. And it didn't show the impact of the clone games on Japan or the USA. That whole kind of soldier plot line kind of went to the wayside. So that's the biggest problem I think that a lot of people have with JJK is that it felt like there was a lot that of untapped potential with regards to plot lines and characters that could have been addressed. And if you want to know more about untapped potential, you can just go rewatch the Kenjaku video from last time. As for My Hero Academia, I know this is something that you have not read. You dropped it partway through. And I'd say the ending is being disappointing is more the fault of problems that arose early in the story. Felt like there's a big rush to get to the very final big climactic battle after the war arc. Uh, Deku's whole vigilante arc was really short. I think it could have been a lot longer. It felt like it had a lot of untapped potential there. The biggest problem that I have with the final chapter and ending is that Deku and Uraraka's relationship is not confirmed for some reason. There are no relationships confirmed despite the ending, the final chapter being a 8-year time jump. So I've seen people speculate that the reason why he didn't is because there were very fervent shippers online who have gotten very mad if something like Deku and Bakugo was not made canon. But either way, it just feels like it doesn't satisfy anyone and it disappoints everyone at the same time. And also, just in general, the whole series felt like there were some characters who got wasted. Like, for example, see Mirio getting his quirk back off screen with little build up and then not doing much for the rest of the series felt like a waste of his whole sacrifice. I'm not, I'm of the opinion that the ending for My Academia wasn't that bad. I think it was more just a meh, whatever. I would say it was better than the JJK ending, but it's definitely not great. And then Naruto, I feel like I barely need to talk about this since we've discussed this to death. But similarly to My Hero, the problems arose early in the story with the war arc. It got way far away from the original premise of just ninjas. We had just continent destroying blasts from Biju and stuff. Naruto and Sasuke's character arcs were pretty much done with Naruto having earned the respect of the village by defeating Pain, and then Sasuke having defeated Itachi. It felt like they could have just moved on to their final conflict with each other instead of having to do this whole shit with Obito in the war. Obviously, Kaguya is a very disappointing final boss. Kind of just came out of nowhere. It's like foreshadowed in one chapter, like 20 or so chapters before she made her debut, but she was still very disappointing. And I feel like I just don't have to even go into Black Setsu. And then Death Note. This is the only other ending here, at least in this lineup here, that you have not read because you dropped it because you knew how bad it got. But yeah, L was just too big of a character to be followed up on. And the last half of Death Note really just felt like Joker without Batman. Like I can't even remember the names of the other two guys who had to follow up L. It's not off the top of my head, but they were nowhere near as close to L. It was nowhere near as entertaining as a game of cat and mouse between Light and L. So yeah, I guess from this we can conclude that anime endings suck. But do they? For every example of a bad anime ending you can come up with, you can easily find a good anime ending. For example, here we got Cowboy Bebop. I won't be going into all these in as much detail, but Cowboy Bebop was a very satisfying ending for giving the four main characters a good conclusion and wrapping up the vicious plot line well. Code Geass, the last five episodes were so good that they made everyone forget that the rest of season two was boring as shit. Monster, a brilliant ending to the arcs for Tenma, Johan, Grimmer, Lunge, and all the other characters. And it really wrapped up the theme of nihilism versus optimism perfectly. And then Fullmetal Alchemist likewise gave good character arcs to all the core principal characters and wrapped them up well. And unlike MHA, the main couple actually got together at the end in a very satisfying and wholesome way. So now they've established that there are anime with good endings and anime with bad endings. Can we find any sort of commonalities between them? And one of the first ones that might arise is that Cowboy Bebop and Code Geass, or anime original, TV original anime that did not come from manga, Monster was released bi-weekly and FMA was released monthly. Whereas the examples that we went over bad endings all come from Shonen Jump. Is I think I don't need to explain this to you, but just for the sake of covering our bases, they're a weekly manga magazine infamous for having grueling schedules and deadlines for the artists. And it was recently talked about in I think a JJK related interview in some magazine. But for basically any series not named One Piece, the Shonen Jump editors basically tell you when you have to end the series by, and that can obviously lead to endings feeling rushed and things getting dropped. And we can conclude that, can we conclude, I guess, that Shonen Jump is a death sentence for an anime's ending? Can we come to that conclusion? Well, no, we can't. Because there have been good endings in Shonen Jump, and there have been bad endings outside of Shonen Jump. For example, here we've got Haikyuu. This is another series that you have not finished. So you just gotta take my word that the ending was really good. But it was a great resolution to all the major characters, and even like all the side characters and all the teams of the series, we got to see what they were doing as adults after a time skip. So it really just wrapped up all the characters quite well. And then for a bad ending from outside of Shonen Jump, we got Attack on Titan. It's probably the most controversial ending in all of anime, at least within the past decade, possibly of all time, with the exception of maybe Evangelion. I don't think it was that bad, but there were definitely problems with the ending. Uh, and the biggest thing that led to the controversy was Aaron feeling s- so childlike at the end, like with his whole conversation with Armin, and not really being like this monster that I think people kind of wanted him to be like. And also Armin telling Aaron, "Thanks for being a mass murderer for us," was a terrible line. It was so bad they got cut from the anime when they adapted it. But I think that if you look at the perception that anime always had for Attack on Titan, it was much more positive. But I'd say the fact that Isayama went on a panel to talk about the ending and cried and apologized for letting people down shows, if nothing else, how upset people were over the manga's ending. So we've seen these examples, counterexamples, and counterexamples that there are good and bad endings in anime and manga everywhere. So this leads to two questions. What is causing these bad endings to happen? And why do people think that most anime have bad endings? Well, to answer the first question, I think it really just comes down to schedule. You see here on the left, we've got images of four mangaka. Top left, Akira Toriyama died at 68. Kentaro Miura died at 54. Yoshihiro Togashi, infamous for taking many hiatuses due to his health problems. And bottom right there, Kohiro Koshi had a lot of health problems similarly when finishing up My Hero Academia. And unpictured, but Gege Akutami when making JJK had health a lot of health problems that basically made him go bi-weekly towards the end of its serialization. And there was even a 3 week break where he had to get his appendix removed. So is this just to show that being a manga is very tough physically and mentally on people? It leads to death early on. So it's very hard to be a manga artist. And also I think just the nature of manga being published chapter by chapter isn't something that favors everyone. Uh they have to push out chapters either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly unless they're like on a special deal with the publisher, which is only gonna be for like your top end mangaka like Kentaro Miura or Togashi. And that can lead to if people having to publish chapters when they aren't ready or when they aren't fully satisfied with what they've made. So this can lead to problems piling on, starting in one chapter and piling on over and over. That can lead to plot holes or rushed endings to arcs and character dynamics being muddled. It can lead to a whole lot of problems, which can cascade into an ending feeling very unsatisfying. And then for the second question about why is there a perception of anime having bad endings, I think it can be best broken down with the 80/20 rule, which states that 20% of the causes lead to 80% of the outcomes, which is a little bit of a weird way to explain it. But uh, basically, you can see by this graph here, 20% of the effort leads to 80% of the results, 80% of the effort leads to 20% of the results. So basically, I was how this pertains to anime and me as a whole. I think it means that people will focus on the extremes and ignore the average. So when it comes to these endings, people are focusing hyper in on these bad endings, especially if it's from a popular title like JJK or My Hero, and they'll ignore all the average, the okay, or the mediocre endings, and will only focus on the worst of the worst, the most infamous of the infamous. Or to put it in simpler terms, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, after going all this, what can we conclude? Does anime have an ending problem? No, at least not more than any other category of media. But that being said, if an anime does have a bad ending, you should 100% meme on it. So I'll see your response.